quick reminder, I'm going to be doing a group coaching session in the middle of this month. It's looking like it's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern Time, February 20th, which is a Monday. So if you're interested in joining that group coaching session, it's going to be $50, and it's going to be recorded if you can't make it live. Either you understand the benefit of a session like this or you don't. So if you do, email me if you want to join us in person or recorded. info@radicalcounselor.com. I thought I would spend a couple minutes today expanding upon something I mentioned yesterday and something that I get asked from time to time to clarify. And that is the void state. The void! Manifesting from the void. And I actually do discuss this a fair amount on my podcast, Law of Attraction Explored. I often delve into this subject, just not explicitly and directly, because I think that term, the void state, is dumb, as you're about to hear. But I actually talk about the void a lot. And I'll link above to one of several episodes I've done kind of describing, in my opinion, the difference between this LOA stuff and when we talk about the void. Because in my opinion, I think that this LOA stuff predominantly, if not entirely, is about practically improving your life or improving other people's lives, the world around you. All of that is based on personality, on self, right? And the self changes, the world changes. Self. It's personal. And in my opinion, the void, as people like to call it, both in LOA circles and in spiritual circles or whatever, the void is impersonal. It's not personal. And this is something that I see in the LOA community, people not understanding whatsoever. And it's why I like to discuss it on the podcast. And I usually don't discuss it here as much. I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty profound subject, and it doesn't lend itself necessarily to car videos. Plus, if I discuss it in this car video setting, there's a good chance I'm going to get pissed off. Which might be what's going to happen just now. There are teachers, LOA teachers that I've found, and it's not like I know every LOA teacher, okay? I mean, I'm more well-versed on a lot of these LOA teachers than most people you see on YouTube, because the ignorance here in terms of like the history of LOA is shocking. But it's not like I know everybody. But a few of the LOA teachers I've seen that touch upon the void, as it's called, at least occasionally, somewhat intelligently, that I've seen. One's Joel Goldsmith. One reason I've been into his stuff lately, and I'm going to be posting another podcast episode soon about Joel Goldsmith's teachings, is because Goldsmith talks about the absolute method and links it sometimes to like this void concept, right? The concept of the void. He does it occasionally. He also says a lot of stuff, expands upon it, that I think is totally unrelated to the void. Totally unrelated. Like most of us, he spouts a lot of bullshit. But he does touch upon the void occasionally. And he's a great LOA teacher. Fantastic LOA teacher. Another one who touches upon the void subject, the void state, which is not touches upon the idea of the void. You just get the sense of like a real understanding of like the void in her teachings, is H.M. Lee Cady. H.M. Lee Cady, I've said this before, she just strikes me as like the most like deeply spiritual of any LOA teacher I've read. And because there's a profundity to her statements and a deep spiritual just conveyance of what she's saying in her teachings. She never uses the word the void, I don't think, but the way she talks about what she's discussing, it's like she's touching upon this subject some. So I think that she does it as well, and I feel like she spouts a lot less bullshit than Goldsmith does when she discusses it. And finally, I would say the person who discusses the void most intelligently that I've read in LOA circles is Richard Dotz, a modern teacher. Richard discusses the void. I had that quote in yesterday's video about substitute your fear and worry stories with nothing or the void. Richard discusses the void, the void, very well at times. And he, more than any teacher, links this voidness with a practical application of LOA principles. Better than anybody I've ever encountered. I'll put a link above to another podcast episode I did, just talking about Richard's approach and just how it links with this idea of the void, right? But again, Richard, despite discussing the void better than any LOA teacher I've read, he spouts so much bullshit about what it means and all this stuff, and especially lately his whole Not Mine books and stuff. I haven't read all of those new ones, but as great a teacher as Richard is, and as great an LOA teacher as Richard is, if I want to find out about the void, I'm not looking to Richard Dotz. I'm not looking to Joel Goldsmith, and I'm not looking to H. Emily Cady. I'm looking to those people for great LOA advice, all of which they give. And all three of those people were really spiritually attuned. So it's almost natural that they would discuss or touch upon the void in some way in their teachings. But the void is impersonal, which means it's not a state. It's not a state you attain. The void is not a state. The void state does not exist, okay? It's not a state. It's not a state. The absolute method that we often talk about is you recognize God, right? But even when you do that, when you recognize God, you realize God is what you are not what you are in many ways, if we want to get truthful or real about it, in my opinion. God is beyond comprehension. And when we just touch that a little bit, it's wow, we feel peace, the peace that passeth understanding. Again, Goldsmith discusses this really well. And there's power there. And when we recognize that, when we recognize God in our everyday living by just becoming still and recognizing Him, right, or whatever phrase you want to use, not only do we feel more peaceful, but it seems like our outer life, our external world improves, right? So that's the connection with external manifesting, is that. And it makes sense, on a psychological level, with what Coué talks about. If you feel peace from being present, from being in the now, if you feel that contentment, you're auto-suggesting contentment to yourself, and you get more contentment in your outer reality. But the void, what we're just discussing there with the absolute method and feeling that contentment, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's not what the void really even begins to be. The point is that the void, God, is unknowable and great and better than anything you could ever conceive from your personal subjectivity. It is alive. And, quite frankly, to sound like an asshole, I like what I write about the void in books like The Joy of Not Thinking and some of those podcast episodes, what I talk about when I talk about the void, better than any of those LOA teachers. Because that's something I'm much more into than any LOA concept, and always have been since I was a teenager. And as I often say, I would, if you want to learn about the void, get some conceptual understanding of what it means. I don't even know if that fucking matters. But if you want to get some conceptual understanding, don't go to LOA teachers. Look at non-dual stuff. Look at Zen stuff, mystic stuff, like stuff that has nothing to do with changing your external reality. Like, you might externally change your reality some by, looking at these teachings and then feeling them in your bones. But it's not about changing your external reality. And that's why, there's like a lot of my stuff is like trying to bring together these very practical LOA concepts with in my opinion, deeper spirituality, this void, these void teachings, bringing the two of those together in some way. And I'm the first to say that they're hard to bring together. And a lot of times when I try to connect them, I can't. Because the void is like, whoa! Right now. Nothing you can conceive of. And so when all these LOA hotshots talk about the void and the void state and what it means, and I'm going to manifest from the void state, woo! You can guarantee yourself that they are full of shit. Some of my favorite people, modern people that talk about this, Jan Fraser, Byron Katie, UG Krishnamurti, Nisargadatta Maharaj, especially the stuff, his dialogues that Robert Powell edited, like The Ultimate Medicine. Those are examples of teachers who talk about the void much more, I guess you could say, accurately. Or when I read Jan Fraser, right? Like when I read When Fear Falls Away by Jan Fraser. Or when I read 1,000 Names for Joy by Byron Katie. Or when I hear, a UG conversation that I watch on YouTube, or a transcription, or a dialogue that Nisargadatta Maharaj had with somebody who was asking him questions about reality. When I read or hear that stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. And it's got nothing to do with improving your life or anyone else's life. The truth is blinding in the best way possible. It's better than any LOA concept. And that's that.